If you want to play hero, step onto the mat. I'll show you what happens when you defend a useless janitor. The insult came from the dojo's undefeated top fighter as a woman in a worn hoodie stepped in front of an elderly janitor who had just been shoved aside. To everyone watching, she was nothing more than a quiet outsider with no rank, no belt, and no place in a room ruled by brute force. She didn't argue or accept the challenge, and her refusal drew laughter, the kind reserved for someone presumed weak. What none of them knew was that she had once served in a Navy SEAL unit erased from official records, where silence was discipline and restraint was deadlier than aggression. The moment the fighter finally moved against her, he would realize the truth too late. This wasn't a challenge she had walked into. It was a mistake he would never forget. Rhea Calloway walked into the Iron Talon dojo that afternoon like she was just stopping by for a quick look. Nothing special. She had on this old gray hoodie, the kind that's been washed too many times, with jeans that didn't scream fashion and sneakers scuffed from real use. Her hair was pulled back low, no fuss, and her face was clean, no makeup to hide behind. She moved quiet, eyes scanning the room without making a show of it. The place was buzzing with energy, mats laid out, people in crisp uniforms stretching or sparring in pairs. She stood off to the side, watching a class wrap up, not drawing attention until the trouble started. Briggs Malloy, the janitor, was mopping up a corner, his back bent a little from years of hard work, his hands steady but slow. He was in his mid-50s, with a limp from an old injury, and he kept his head down, just doing his job. But then one of the buckets tipped, water spilling across the edge of the mat. It wasn't a big deal, but in a place like this, everything was about control. Dante Corin spotted it first. He was the star here, 28, built like a machine, with tattoos snaking up his arms and a black belt that meant he hadn't lost a match in years. He strutted around like the dojo was his kingdom, always quick with a smirk for anyone below him. He turned, eyes narrowing, and barked at Briggs. "You blind, old man? Get that crap off the floor before someone slips and sues this place." Briggs muttered an apology, reaching for a rag, but Dante wasn't done. He stepped closer, towering over him. "People like you shouldn't even be in here. You're a hazard." A couple of the younger students chuckled, feeding off his energy. One of them, a cocky guy in his early 20s with gelled hair and an entitled grin, kicked lightly at the bucket, sending more water sloshing. The room got a little quieter, but nobody stepped in. The cruelty didn't stop at words. Dante reached onto the small utility cart Briggs kept beside him, snatching up a small, framed photograph that the older man kept propped against his cleaning supplies. It was a faded black and white picture of a platoon, clearly decades old, the glass cracked in the corner. "This what you stare at while you pretend to work?" Dante sneered, holding it out of Briggs' reach as the janitor's calloused hand swiped desperately at the air. "Some old glory days garbage? You probably weren't even a soldier, just the guy who peeled potatoes." With a flick of his wrist, Dante tossed the frame onto the hardwood floor, the sound of shattering glass echoing sharply through the cavernous room. He ground the heel of his bare foot into the wreckage, crushing the photo beneath the shards, while Briggs dropped to his knees, his hands hovering over the ruined memory, trembling violently as he picked glass out of the paper. That's when Rhea moved. She didn't rush, just walked over calm, positioning herself between Dante and Briggs. She looked up at Dante, her voice even. "He's just doing his work. Let him finish." The words hung there, simple, no heat behind them. Dante blinked, then scanned her up and down, taking in the plain clothes, the lack of any gear. His lip curled. "And who the hell are you? Some random chick off the street thinks she can tell me what to do?" The laughter started low, from the students gathered around. One woman, sleek in her designer workout gear, fake nice with highlights and a status watch, leaned to her friend. "Look at her. Probably can't afford a membership. Coming in here like she owns the place." Another guy, insecure under his bulk, puffed up. "Yeah, sweetie, this ain't a soup kitchen. Janitor's got his lane, you got yours, outside." The snobby girl, whose name was Chloe, didn't just whisper. She pulled out a phone encased in glittery plastic and started recording, framing the shot to capture Rhea's worn-out sneakers and the hole in the sleeve of her hoodie. "Live streaming this disaster right now," she announced to the room, her voice pitching up into a performance. "Guys, you won't believe this. Some homeless woman just wandered off the street to harass Dante. Look at the dirt on her jeans. It's actually sad. She probably thinks this is a shelter." She zoomed in on Briggs, who was trying to sweep up the glass with shaking hands, and then panned back to Rhea, adding a filter that distorted Rhea's face. Hashtag delusion, hashtag security risk. Someone call the cops before she tries to steal the trophies. The chat on her screen began flooding with laughing emojis as she shoved the phone closer to Rhea's face, invading her personal space for the perfect angle. Master Halverson watched from the side, arms crossed. He was 61, with a gray beard and a gut that said he hadn't sparred in years. But he ran the dojo like a business, chasing fame and fees. He didn't say a word, just let it unfold, his eyes flicking to the door like he was weighing if this was good drama or bad for the vibe. Dante stepped closer to Rhea, invading her space. You defending this loser? Fine. But if you're gonna play hero, prove it. Step on the mat. Rhea didn't flinch. She glanced at Briggs, who was wiping up the spill, his hands shaking a bit now. I didn't come here to fight. Dante threw his head back, laughing loud. Hear that? She didn't come to fight. Then why you in a dojo, huh? Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. The crowd joined in, murmurs turning to open jeers. Pathetic, someone muttered. Look at those shoes, probably from a thrift store. A snobby girl with perfect nails and a superiority complex added, she thinks standing there makes her tough. Cute. The tension in the room ratcheted up as the entitled kid, Kyle, decided to escalate the situation by grabbing Briggs' mop bucket and intentionally upending the remaining dirty gray water over Rhea's shoes. The liquid soaked instantly into the canvas of her sneakers and the hem of her jeans, creating a dark, spreading stain on the floor. Oops, Kyle said, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he high-fived the bulk guy. Looks like you need a bath anyway. Maybe the janitor can teach you how to clean that up, since you two are on the same level. He kicked the empty plastic bucket toward Rhea's shins, hard enough to bruise, but she didn't even blink, her feet remaining planted as the plastic clattered harmlessly off her ankle. The smell of bleach and old dirt rose up, but Rhea's expression remained terrifyingly neutral, her gaze locked on Dante, ignoring the puddle seeping into her socks. The pressure built as more people circled. One entitled kid, barely out of college with daddy's money funding his lessons, pointed at her hoodie. That thing's older than the janitor. You sure you belong here? We got standards. Laughter rippled again. Briggs tried to stand taller, whispering, Miss, it's okay, I got this. But Dante shoved him lightly aside, focusing on Rhea. Nah, she started it. Now she's got to finish. Halverson finally spoke, his voice gravelly. Rules are rules. You disrupt, you demonstrate. Rhea met his gaze steady. Disrupt? He spilled water. You pushed him. Dante snorted. Oh, now she's a lawyer too. Listen, nobody, get out before I make you. The insults kept coming, each one sharper, the room feeding off itself. A fake nice instructor assistant, all smiles but eyes cold, chimed in. Honey, this is for real fighters, not whatever you are. Rhea didn't raise her voice. She just said, real fighters don't pick on the help. That quieted a few, but Dante pushed forward. Lock the door, he called to a student. She's not leaving till she learns. Halverson walked over to the reception desk and pulled out a generic liability waiver, slapping it onto the counter with a heavy hand, his eyes glinting with malice. Tell you what, he said, loud enough for the back row to hear. We'll make it interesting. Since you care so much about the trash, if you last 3 minutes with Dante, I'll double the old man's severance pay when I fire him tomorrow. But when you lose, and you will lose, you get on your knees and scrub every toilet in this building with a toothbrush while we watch. He uncapped a pen and tossed it at her, the plastic clicking against her chest before falling to the floor. Sign it, or I call the cops for trespassing and have your boyfriend there arrested for property damage regarding that broken glass. It was a trap, a humiliation ritual disguised as a deal, but Halverson was grinning like he'd already won the lottery. The dojo felt smaller now, the air thick with tension. Students chanted low, Fight, fight, fight. Briggs looked worried, stepping back, but one of them tripped him lightly, sending him stumbling. Rhea caught his arm, steadying him without a word. Dante grinned. See? Weak links stick together. Halverson nodded approval, like this was a lesson. Rhea sighed soft, then stepped onto the mat. No warm-up, no stance. She stood there plain, hands at her sides. The crowd erupted in cheers for Dante, who cracked his knuckles. This'll be quick, He circled her, testing. You even know how to throw a punch? Rhea didn't answer, just watched him move. The jeers kept flying. She's gonna cry, from the insecure bulk guy. Bet she runs, from the snobby girl. Dante lunged first, a fast jab meant to intimidate. Rhea shifted minimal, letting it miss by inches. Dante didn't just want to win, he wanted to break something, so he unleashed a vicious chopping leg kick aimed directly at the side of Rhea's knee, a strike designed to tear ligaments and end athletic careers. The sound of his shin cutting the air was audible, a sharp thwip that made the spectators wince in anticipation of the crack. Rhea didn't retreat. Instead, she stepped into the arc of the kick, absorbing the impact on her thigh with a subtle shift of weight that killed the momentum instantly. She stood like a statue, the force that would have crumbled a normal person barely registering on her face. Dante stumbled back, his own shin vibrating from hitting what felt like a concrete pillar, confusion flashing in his eyes for the first time. He shook his leg out, trying to mask the pain, while Rhea simply dusted off her jeans where his foot had connected, looking at him with the boredom of someone waiting for a bus. Dante pressed harder, combos flying, each strike precise from years of training. The mat thumped under his feet. Rhea dodged, steps economical, always ending up in his blind spot. She didn't strike back, just evaded, her breathing even like she'd done this in worse places. A murmur started in the crowd. One student, a bit older, frowned. She's not tiring? Dante swung wider, frustration showing. Stand still, damn it! He aimed a kick high, his signature move, leg whipping through the air. Rhea caught his ankle mid-swing, twisted her hip just right. Dante wobbled, pulling back quick, but his face flushed red. The room gasped, then laughed it off. Lucky break, someone yelled. But Briggs, from the edge, narrowed his eyes, something familiar in her form. Enraged by the embarrassment, Dante abandoned his technical training and resorted to pure, dirty street violence, grabbing a heavy wooden bow staff from the weapons rack on the wall as he scrambled up. You want to dance? Let's dance, he roared, swinging the oak staff with lethal force toward her temple, a blow that could easily fracture a skull. The crowd screamed, some in excitement, others in sudden fear that this had gone too far. Halverson didn't intervene. He leaned forward, hungry for the violence. As the wood whistled toward her head, Rhea didn't back away. She moved inside the arc, jamming her forearm against his hands to stifle the power, the wood clattering harmlessly against her shoulder. Before he could retract it, she placed a palm on his chest and shoved, just a few inches, but with such focused kinetic energy that Dante flew backward, crashing into the rack and sending the rest of the weapons clattering down around him in a chaotic heap. Kyle, the rich kid, seeing his idol humiliated, decided to intervene from the sidelines. He grabbed a heavy medicine ball and hurled it at the back of Rhea's knees while she was focused on Dante. It was a coward's move, meant to cripple her while she wasn't looking. Without turning her head, as if she had eyes stitched into her hoodie, Rhea lifted her leg, catching the heavy ball on the top of her foot and stalling its momentum instantly. With a fluid flick of her ankle, she launched the ball back with 3 times the speed, sending it rocketing into Kyle's gut. He folded in half with a wheezing gasp, dropping to the floor and clutching his stomach, turning a majestic shade of purple as he fought for oxygen. Rhea didn't even acknowledge him, her eyes still locked on Dante, reducing Kyle's agony to background noise. The mockery turned uglier now. Dante circled again, spitting words. You think that's skill? You're nothing but a dodge monkey. The entitled kid shouted, Finish her, Dante! Show the trash where she belongs! Halverson smirked. This is what happens when outsiders meddle. Rhea stayed silent, but when Dante rushed in close, grabbing for a hold, she countered smooth, a lock on his wrist that popped his shoulder out for a split second. Dante yelped, staggering back, clutching it. The dojo went quiet, then exploded. Cheater! From the fake nice woman. That's not allowed! Dante roared. You fight dirty! Briggs muttered low. That move, army stuff. Nobody heard him yet. Dante, panting and cradling his arm, signaled to 2 of his largest enforcers, guys who looked more like bouncers than martial artists, to flank her from behind. Hold her! Dante hissed, abandoning all pretense of a fair fight. Just hold her still so I can teach her a lesson. The 2 men stepped onto the mat, closing in on Rhea from the rear, grinning as they reached out to grab her arms. The violation of dojo etiquette was absolute, but the mob wanted blood. As the first man grabbed her hoodie, Rhea dropped her center of gravity, spinning like a top. She used the first man's momentum to throw him over her hip, slamming him into the second attacker. Their heads collided with a sickening thud, and both men collapsed in a tangled heap of limbs. Rhea stood over them, adjusting her sleeves, while the room fell into a terrified, suffocating silence. Halvorsen stepped forward, pointing. "Invalid technique! You're out!" Students nodded, demanding she leave. "Get her out of here!" Rhea held Dante's gaze as he nursed his arm, but she didn't tighten her grip. She'd already released. The insults peaked, voices overlapping. "Freak! Loser! Who let her in?" Briggs tried to speak up, but they shoved him to the wall. Rhea stood firm, not moving off the mat. Then she rolled up her sleeve casual, revealing a faded tattoo, the kind that's been ink-deep and partially lasered. It was a symbol few recognized, but Briggs did. He straightened sudden, saluting crisp like old habits die hard. "Ma'am," he said quiet. The room froze. Dante's eyes widened. Halvorsen paled a touch. Rhea spoke soft. "I promised myself I wouldn't use that anymore." Whispers spread. "What is that? Seals?" Briggs nodded to himself, pieces clicking. The tattoo wasn't just a generic trident. Beneath the ink was a jagged, twisting scar that ran from her elbow to her wrist. A keloid map of a knife wound that had clearly been stitched up in the field. The sight of it stopped the mockery in Chloe's throat. She lowered her phone, the live stream still running, capturing the sudden shift in atmosphere. This wasn't a gym injury. It was a mark of survival from a place where referees didn't exist. Rhea traced the scar absently with her thumb, looking at the pristine, unblemished skin of the fighters around her. "You train for points," she said, her voice carrying to the back of the room without shouting. "You train for trophies. I train to make sure men like you didn't come home." The stark reality of violence, the kind that smells like copper and dust, washed over the room, making their colorful belts look like children's costumes. But they pushed back. Halvorsen sneered. "Past glory don't mean squat here." Dante, still hurting, laughed forced. "You're not a SEAL now, just a has-been." The snobby girl added, "This dojo has its own rules." Briggs got ignored again, pushed aside. Rhea closed her eyes brief, then opened them, steady as ever. Desperate to regain control of the narrative, Dante lunged for a hidden panic button under the master's desk, intending to call private security to drag her out. But before his fingers could graze the plastic, the glass front of the dojo exploded inward. It wasn't an explosion of fire, but of sound and force as a heavy tactical battering ram shattered the locked entrance. Shards of safety glass rained down like diamonds as 4 uniformed figures in full tactical gear swarmed the room, weapons drawn but pointed low, moving with the terrifying synchronization of a hive mind. "Federal agents! Hands where we can see them!" The voice was amplified, booming off the walls. The students who had been jeering seconds ago scrambled backward, tripping over each other, screaming as they pressed themselves against the mirrored walls, their arrogance evaporating into primal fear. The door swung open then, 2 men in plain clothes but with that military bearing walking in. One scanned the room. "We're looking for Rhea Calloway." The other added, "She's under ongoing military protection." Dante dropped to a knee, pain and shock mixing. Halvorsen sank into a chair, face ashen. The crowd scattered back, murmurs dying. Rhea nodded to the officers, then turned to Briggs, helping him up gentle. "You okay?" He saluted again. "Yes, ma'am." Even with the authorities present, Dante's ego wouldn't let him accept defeat. Seeing Rhea turn her back to address the officers, he seized a jagged shard of the broken glass trophy from the floor. With a primal scream of rage, he scrambled up and lunged at her exposed back, intending to carve her open. The officers raised their weapons, but they were too slow. Rhea, however, didn't need them. Reacting to the displacement of air, she spun on her heel, catching Dante's wrist mid-air. She didn't just hold it, she twisted it vertically until the bone snapped audibly, forcing him to drop the glass. Continuing the motion, she swept his legs out from under him and drove his face into the mat, pressing her knee into the back of his neck. "That," she whispered into his ear as he sobbed into the floor, "is why you check your corners." As the officers secured the scene, one of the agents walked directly to Chloe, who was still paralyzed, holding her phone. He didn't ask. He simply plucked the device from her perfectly manicured hand. Evidence, he stated flatly, glancing at the screen where thousands of comments were now scrolling by, the tide having turned completely against the dojo. The live stream had captured everything: the bullying, the illegal moves, the weapon, and Dante's cowardly attack from behind. "You just broadcast assault with a deadly weapon and conspiracy to a global audience, miss. I hope you have a good lawyer." Chloe's face crumbled, her knees giving out as she realized her quest for viral fame had just documented her own complicity in a felony. She slumped against the wall, weeping as the chat filled with, justice for Briggs and calls for her arrest. The investigation didn't just stop at the assault. As the agents began seizing computers and files from Halverson's office, a K-9 unit brought in to sweep the premises sat down firmly next to the loose floorboards under the master's desk. Halverson began to hyperventilate as the officers pried up the wood, revealing not just cash but stacks of illegal steroids and unprescribed painkillers that he had been selling to his students, including the underage ones. The safety violations were just the tip of the iceberg. The dojo was a front for a distribution ring. As the handcuffs clicked around Halverson's wrists, the illusion of his respectable business shattered completely. He wasn't a master, he was a dealer. The parents waiting outside, seeing the drugs brought out in evidence bags, began screaming at him, their admiration turning to murderous rage. In the days that followed, things unraveled quiet but sure. Dante's shoulder needed surgery, and word got out about the incident. Videos from phones leaked online, showing his arrogance crumbling. Sponsors pulled back, his undefeated rep tarnished. He ended up leaving the dojo, taking low-paying gigs at smaller gyms, his ego deflated for good. Halverson faced an investigation. Turns out the dojo had safety violations, and with the military angle, authorities dug deep. He lost his license, the place shut down temporary, then sold off cheap. He retired broke, muttering about bad luck. The entitled kid, the one with the rich dad, got exposed in a forum post. His mocking comments traced back, family business boycotted subtle. He lost his spot in a prestigious tournament, doors closing one by one. The snobby girl, always posting her perfect life, had her account hacked or something. Old messages surfaced, showing her bullying history. Brands dropped her, friends distanced. She faded from the scene, applying for regular jobs. The insecure bulk guy tried to apologize online, but it backfired. People piled on. His gym membership revoked elsewhere. The fake nice woman, turns out she was an assistant instructor, got fired outright when the dojo's review came in. She bounced around, but her rep followed, no one trusting her smiles anymore. Before leaving the scene, the commanding officer of the tactical team, a man with stars on his collar, stopped in front of Briggs. The janitor was holding his broom like a crutch, looking at the floor, ashamed of the mess. The officer gently took the broom from his hand and set it against the wall. Then, in front of the students who had called him garbage and hazard, the officer snapped to a rigid attention and rendered a slow, respectful salute. "Sergeant Major Malloy," the officer said, his voice thick with reverence. "We read your file. The work you did in the Gulf, half of us wouldn't be here without the extraction team you led." The room went dead silent. The useless janitor straightened his spine, the years of pain melting away for a second, and returned the salute with perfect form. The students who had mocked him lowered their heads, the shame burning hotter than any punch Dante could have thrown. Rhea didn't stick around for any of it. She walked out with the officers, Briggs trailing grateful. Later, he found a note from her, with a contact for veteran support. She kept moving, plain as ever, no fanfare. Briggs sat alone that night, staring at an old photo from his service days, a group of soldiers in the desert, faces blurred by time, but memories sharp. He traced a finger over it, whispering thanks. One of the students, the older one who'd whispered during the fight, quit martial arts altogether, started volunteering at a vet center, eyes opened. Dante, months later, stared at his scarred shoulder in the mirror, flexing slow, the pain a reminder every day. Halvorsen packed boxes in the empty dojo, echoes of laughter gone, just silence now. Rhea, somewhere else, laced up her sneakers, ready for whatever came next, her steps light but sure. You know that feeling when the world pushes you down, but you stand anyway? It hurts, but it shapes you. You've been there, holding ground quiet. It wasn't fair, but you survived. You're stronger for it. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below, and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally, healing.